record. Hey everybody, what is going on? It is Friday, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of No Label Live. And so on this show, if you don't know about it, we discuss all things label and how labels stand in our way or they create the future that we want. So I bring guests on all the time to dispel the notion that who you think you are right now is who you have to be. This week, we are talking to an intuitive career and life coach, Bernadette Dunn of Bernadette Coaching. And so, Bernadette, I want to introduce you and let you introduce yourself to the audience and what it is exactly you do.
Thank you, Nathan, and I love you so much. This is so great to be on, so thank you for having me. So yes, as you just shared, I am an intuitive career and life coach, and that can sound really interesting for most, but really what that means is I coach not only myself, and I'm continuing to do my own inner work and development. I also coach my clients into learning how to trust themselves, learn to understand what it feels like from a sensory perspective, to trusting your own instinct, your own intuition. And most of the time clients do come to me specifically around career. They've hit a wall. Either we're in their current position, they're not sure if they're still happy. So that's a popular area that I support clients in coaching into. And then I would say the second area is in regards to life, relationships, and what's next.
And yeah, you guys, if you're watching, I can tell you a firsthand experience. The sensory part is true, because Bernadette was a coach that I had in my emotional intelligence process. And the one question that she would always ask me is, okay, where do you feel it? I'm like, I only tell you two places every time. And it was the heart and the head. So that's very true. Absolutely. And so what we wanted to do today is kind of talk about the Enneagram and how that kind of labels individuals as how things show up for them. And we're using me as the guinea pig. So I will let you be the guide today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Here we are. You and I have a similar passion around not wanting labels to define us. And then we're going to talk today about how I chose to use and get certified. So I am a certified coach. I'm certified with the Enneagram technology. So essentially the Enneagram is a guide or a map to understand our personality archetype. And the counterintuitive component of this, which is such an awesome connection with what you're up to, is that our personalities are not who we are. And so there's all kinds of personality assessments out there which give us great information to better understand ourselves. But where we should be specifically careful and cautious is to not then box ourselves into saying, oh, I'm this kind of person because I took the Myers-Briggs personality assessment or the DISC or the Matrix. And so I often hear that labeling happening, and that's where we tend to miss the mark. So with the Enneagram, it's all about learning that we are not that dominant personality archetype. And that's what we're going to play around with today with you.
All right. Well, we're going to get to know a lot about me, and I definitely see that archetype show up in my life a lot of the time. So I'm ready for whatever you throw at me.
Okay, great. So what I like to do as far as coaching is in the beginning, it's really important, especially as we're having this conversation over video, to just kind of check in with ourselves right now. So as we've had all these thoughts, I know I have, it's my first time doing this kind of video, so I'm excited, not sure what to expect. But as we settle in here, let's just take a moment and kind of ground ourselves. So grounding is so important in this work, and it's a beautiful practice for anyone to start to incorporate throughout the day. And what this looks like is just letting your body kind of settle into where we are right now. We're not going to do a particularly long grounding. Sometimes we will in certain sessions, but right now let's just feel the contact of our body with the connection points. If your feet are on the ground, your legs, your sit bones, your arms, whatever body parts that you can feel contact and connection with, the chair, the floor, the table. And as we do that, yeah, just take a few breaths to just come in to this moment right now. And what we're looking to create in this grounding is coming back into ourself. And we have three intelligence centers. We have the mind, our beautiful brain, the controller of our body. So we'll take a moment and just gently notice any kind of activity or sensations in the mind, in the head. And when I share or mention sensations, you can sense into a texture, a color, a temperature, tingling. And sometimes people don't have any sensation that they're noticing. So it's important to also become aware if there's no sensations that you're noticing. And then we can start to develop that as well. And then we'll drop into our heart. You mentioned your other favorite place and notice. And as we drop into our heart is the emotional brain of our body. It is what supports us in connecting to our feelings. And at a deeper level, our heart is the operating brain of who we are, our truth. So we just take a moment and sense in if there's any activity there, any colors, anything that wants to be seen or heard as we activate that place in our body. And then we'll drop into our third brain, our third intelligence center, which is our gut.
Good.
This is our gut instinct. And I remind myself, I remind clients, we can't think our way into our gut. That is counterintuitive. Our gut is the operating system of how our body operates. So when we start connecting into this grounding and connecting to that space in our belly, in our core, in our spine, in our pelvic bowl, in our sit bones. And just here, it's so important to really connect to any sensations throughout the body, because this is where the central nervous system is really coming from. So we may not always have thoughts from our mind or emotional feelings when we start tapping into that gut instinct. But there might be something like, I hear like little spidey senses somewhere else in your body. So that's where we really want to start to pay attention to when we start connecting to our gut.
All right.
So what are you noticing, Nathan?
I'm excited and nervous about what we're about to do with our time here today.
And where are you noticing in your body? You said nervousness, but where do you actually feel nervousness?
So, it automatically goes back to my heart just about every time.
Yeah.
That's my main place where all my emotions and all my fears and all that stuff comes from right there.
Yeah. So as you kind of sit with that for a moment, can you feel any sensory in that heart space? How would you describe it to someone listening right now?
Kind of like jumpy, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it's like movement. The excited part of it's like really wanting to move around and see what happens.
That's awesome. That's great. Noticing that movement in that heart center. So learning, okay, so do you want to share what you learned about yourself in relationship to the Enneagram and what your dominant archetype personality?
So I am a type 3, and the name of that is the achiever. And so far, what I've learned from what you've sent me, what really I found interesting is the diagram, right? It had things that were above water, like the famous iceberg picture of success, right? Only people see so much and they don't see what's down below the surface. And for what you're talking about today, that's happening without uh, any thought to it at all. So that's what I found interesting.
Yeah. Would you mind if I shared that iceberg picture that you were describing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let me get that one pulled up. So that way others can connect to what that looks like. And each
Mm-hmm.
type has one. With the Enneagram, there's 9 points on the Enneagram. We'll show a circle and what all 9 types look like. But here is that diagram that you were just referencing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you mentioned it because you're right. So why the somatic intelligence, and somatic means body. So the listening, the noticing, the sensing of the body is so important in this work. Is, as you just shared, there's a lot operating underneath that waterline. And so in this work, we are looking to start to even deepen in beyond that personality type to really what's happening in the body so that we can begin to learn when we're operating from our true essence, our gifts. So if you look up here on the left-hand side, the gifts of someone with this type is that they're oriented to growth and learning. Here we are. No surprise there. They're very inspirational to others and to success for themselves. They have an inherent quality of belief in self, and they're ambitious. So what are you hearing or what are you noticing when I share these gifts of this type?
So, I mean, I relate heavily to all those, and I think from an outside world perspective, that's how I would describe myself. But as you're talking, I'm thinking I was looking at the other things like uh, driven to be on the other side, the average behaviors, detached from emotion, uh, driven to be the best. And as we went through our process together, that was a lot of the feedback that I would get is, okay, you're always focused on the result. And that makes me feel like you don't care about me.
So just practicing and checking in with yourself right now as you share that insight and that reflection, what are you noticing in your body?
When I say that, I'm like, I actually feel kind of heated with myself because that's not how I want to show up at all. And even though it shifted for me over our time, it still feels the same way hearing the feedback again. Like I never want to show up that way.
And when you say heated, where was there anywhere specific in your body that you feel that heat?
Um, yeah, so I would say it's coming through my shoulders right now.
Mm. So when we started, you had the sensation in your heart center, and there was a lot of movement happening. And now,
Mhm.
as you're reflecting on some of these, on the side where it says average behavior, I'm hearing some of what we call the inner critic showing up. And so
Yeah,
you're sensing some heat and some heat specifically around the shoulders. So those are some things, we'll just pay attention to. So it doesn't have to mean anything, but this is just some sensory to pay attention. So when you notice yourself, I mentioned the inner critic. So when you notice yourself having this evaluation of how well you're doing and checking in with those sensories, or maybe if you start to notice the heat in your shoulders, that could be some support for you to check in with yourself
yeah,
and know what are those private conversations happening.
absolutely.
So you shared that with the training that we did, which was an emotional intelligence training, so it's a lot of heart-based work. You're having noticing some similar patterns and experiences, and I know it's common that when people start getting into personal development and professional development, there can sometimes be an expectation of, oh, well, I already did this work. I already broke through this. So why is this showing up again?
It's always there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here, when we use the Enneagram and we learn what our dominant personality type is, we learn that the habits and the behaviors actually are typically the same patterns. And so that's where we look below the line here.
Okay.
And this is also where we get a little bit deeper into the fact that you are not your personality. So when we get below, let's see here, in this sense of self area, this is the personality's belief. So Nathan, without you doing anything, without you trying, your inherent gifts are that you're oriented to growth and learning. This is who you were born to be. And then as life began, as early as our, toddler cells, our personalities began to develop. So someone with this archetype, the achiever archetype, their personality began to develop, and this sense of self is what was created. So this sense of self that I'm accomplished, goal-oriented with unlimited potential. This is the distinction. This is not the truth of who you are. This is the personality wanting you to believe you're this way.
Mm-hmm.
So personality is in charge down here. You can see even below, there's this like really heavy core belief system that's like this invisible network. If you think of operating systems like our phones or our laptops here, it's this underlying invisible operating system. And so the operating system for this personality has a belief that life is a contest. I have to be the best.
Yeah.
My worth and value come from my achievements. And if we really stop and pause and ask ourselves, is that true? Is that true, Nathan?
No, it's not true.
And so as you connect to this, what are you noticing right now in your body?
Okay, in my body. So right now, I would say that went down to the gut.
What kind of sensory, if someone listening, how would you describe to them what that gut feeling was?
Oh, like it just like something dropped in there. It got kind of heavy.
Yeah.
And I think it's because ultimately we know these things that using my example, we know that uh, the value of who you are doesn't come from everything that you do. It comes from who you actually are and how you show up to people. But labels have been placed in all different, either by ourselves, by the outside world, who we interact with. It makes it real easy to have that become your unconscious story about yourself.
Yeah. And with this particular type, the achiever, they get a lot of things done. They're results oriented, they're high producers. So not only is there the individual's core beliefs down here, but then we have a culture, the US culture specifically, that inflates this belief system even more. It's
Mm-hmm.
a highly rewarding belief system from a culture perspective. So someone with this archetype, and even as I was listening, what was coming to me is just the development of self-compassion, especially in that heart space, and really including themselves and checking in with themselves as a regular practice. Because someone with this archetype can have a pattern and tendency to be producing for others because of the results they get, the acknowledgement that they get. So it keeps them in this loop. However, underneath it all, there can be a lot of other emotions that this type may be holding back and not having the tools yet to really get the emotional support for themselves, because they're the one that's seen as the successful person. So with this type, I'm going to repeat that again. It's really important to develop a practice of self-compassion, and especially in that heart space, and being really sensitive and loving, and it tends to be a trust walk in the beginning.
Yeah. What's the one thing you told me? You told me have fun. You need to just have fun sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Because the achievers, they sometimes forget to have fun. Well, and producing for others could be fun for them, but they've got to check in and really connect to what's the motivation. Is it to be seen? If you look down here, is it to be seen as having value?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the motivation? And when this type drops into their heart and they're really including themselves and beginning with this compassionate side, wow, I mean, miracles happen with these highly productive individuals when they're really in contact with their heart. And we're seeing it with you and everything that you're up to. It's incredible.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So this is one example, and I want to, so there are how many different types when we look at the Enneagram?
There are 9 types. So I'm going to pull that up for us. Let me get back to the sharing.
And definitely, guys, as you watch this, let us know what value you're getting from the information that's being shared here today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just supporting you, Nathan. This work is really compassionate-based work, to understand that these labels do not define us. And when we start looking at ourselves and we take these personality assessments, just practicing gentle kindness, that this is just information to start to see how we're operating, but really just being gentle and kind, that this is not a way to box ourselves in. And I just want to reiterate that, and especially with the platform that you lead around it.
Oh, before you get going, I thought about this because I'm seeing it now. It's interesting, and we've talked about it, how 3, the highlighted piece there says motivator, and I'm motivator.
Yes, that's another nickname for them. So I pulled this one up specifically because it's the achiever, but it's also called the motivator. So there's no accidents. You chose that name.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to give everyone who's watching and wanting to learn a little bit, the Enneagram is a circle. And I like to think of this circle as a way to learn this is our light, this is our essence. And we have all 9 of these types within us, because this is our wholeness. This is who we be, all the miraculous gifts of what humans can create and be without doing anything. So when we type, why we type is to understand when we're in stress, when we're unconscious, when we're not doing the best we can, it's because our personality is wanting to take over. So that's why we type, so that way we can understand what's our dominant type, so then we can start to unravel those patterns and behaviors. So it's not uncommon that we can connect to many of these types. The 9 here at the top, they're the peacemaker. They're at the top of the circle. So they actually most commonly connect with all the types, because that's part of how that personality operates. They want to make sure everyone else is comfortable and make sure that the circle is whole and complete. And so where they can miss the mark is forgetting to include themselves in that experience.
So what do the lines mean? So the triangle, so a 9 is somehow connected to the 3.
Yes.
What does that mean? Because I know a lot of people who are 9s.
Oh, I know. I saw on your post people were reporting 9s. Yeah. So all the numbers have 2 points that they're connected to, and we call them power points. So for the 3, we'll stay focused on the 3 here. The 3 has a line to the 9 and also a line to the 6. So the 9's personality archetype is the peacemaker. So when a 3 is in stress and operating out of protection, they're not trusting the process. They're not on their trust walk. They're trying to be in control of the experience.
Yeah.
They go to the 9, but they go to the unhealthy side of the 9. And what that means for the 3, that's when they can mirror other people. So instead of knowing what's in their heart, they can get caught up by doing what they think other people want them to do. Because if you also see how it's intersected here, there's this image. So for the 2, 3, and 4, they're in this image group, which is the emotional intelligence group. So that the 3s go to the unhealthy side of the 9. And so they're kind of putting these masks on. Like, oh, do you want me to do this? I'm going to put this on. And that way I'm going to look good over here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Absolutely. Got it.
Yeah. So the work is also having that awareness of when that's starting to happen. And that's where we'll go back and from a coaching perspective, use those body cues. So like if you know when you're getting hot on your shoulders, like, okay, time to check in with my heart would be an example. And clients each session are learning more and more cues to support themselves through the body. So the 3 also has a line to the 6. And the 6 is known as the loyalist. And the 6 teaches us about our inner wisdom, our inner guidance, trusting ourselves. So when the 3 is in stress, going to the unhealthy side of the 9, the balance point is for them to check in with themselves and trust their heart, include their heart in the experience.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can relate to all that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm glad you asked about those lines there. So we'll talk for the 9 though, because I know that there were some 9s commenting, and if they're watching, they actually let me see here. So the 3 goes to the 6, 6 goes to the 9, 9 go to 3. So 3 goes to the unhealthy side of the 9, but the 9, so remember the 9s are the peacemakers. So they're always all about everyone else. Mm-hmm. When the 9s actually check in with themselves and say, what do I want? I want to be seen too, because that's kind of the 3. The 3 is all about, I want to be seen. So when they go to the healthy side of the 3, that's where they're really showing up in their best qualities as the peacemaker. Otherwise, when they go to the 6, they may not speak up as much. They might be really agreeable. But if you also see up here, the 8, 9, and 1 are in the anger group. So the 9s might be someone not saying anything, but like, picture the meme. They're like, their hands might be like really clenched, but they're like kind of like, oh, everything's
Watch out, 9s. I know now.
Yeah, if that.
Look out.
I have a friend who's a 9, and she's always, so like just so like the peacemaker. The mediator, the peacemaker. That's her gift. And I remember one time we run together, and I was like pushing her a little bit, and it was the first time I kind of saw that anger, and I was like, oh, I personally like that side. Right? She's normally very calm, cool, and collective, but yeah. So that's how those lines work. And so for all the types here, you'll learn with the Enneagram, everything's kind of broken into lenses of 3s. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of ways to use the Enneagram. The first step is really just starting to understand what your dominant type is. So anyone looking at the Enneagram, it's just, you can do online assessments. I recommend, connecting with an expert, because they can help you discern which one's your type a little bit easier. Just kind of some rules of thumb. No one should type you. I can't tell you you're a 3 because it's your experience. So just a word of caution there. And then also a reminder that the type you have is not define who you are. It's actually counterintuitive. And so it's about learning the difference between them. And so real quick, we'll go through the 9 types by cluster. So at the top here, I mentioned the 8, 9, and 1. They're in, it's showing here the anger, and they're also in the body, that gut instinct. So their intuitive way of their intelligence is actually through their body. So anyone dominant as an 8, 9, or 1, they tend to use language like, how'd you know what to do? They're like, I just trust my instinct. I mean, it's so like matter of the fact for a lot of these types in the body, in the anger group. The 8, they tend to kind of overuse their body energy, so they can come off and it can feel really intense. The 9 underutilizes it. And the 1 kind of has this limited awareness of their intuitive knowing in their body.
Okay.
And then the 2, 3, and 4, they're in the heart. So they intuitively operate out of their heart. The 2, you can see the name here, is called the helper. So they overuse their heart. So the 2 types, anyone out there who's a 2 type, they have a habit of flattery around, because they overutilize their heart, they often are flattering others because they want to feel loved. So we also think of the Italian mom with the 2 type, someone who's always like, I know what you need. So it's about, yeah, them checking in and be like, okay, what's my motivation of doing this? Like, do I want love? We talked about the 3, so this probably won't be a surprise, Nathan, but the 3 underutilizes their heart. So they're in the heart group. That's their intuitive intelligence center, but the 3 has a habit of boxing their heart in.
We wall that thing up like Donald Trump. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why it's so important to continue, and you're doing awesome, and just continuing to include your heart and connecting to your heart. And I go back to the body part, because we can't, as much as it would be easy to think our way into our heart, we just can't do it. So it's about opening our heart, noticing the sensations, and just keep doing it. And then the 4, the romantic, the artist, they have limited focus of their heart. And what that looks like for the 4 is that they're always kind of going deeper and deeper, like going inward, but they lose contact with their heart. Like they think they're like going really deep in their heart, but at one point they kind of like lose contact. And so they get into a lot of fantasy and story. They can sometimes be seen as dramatic when they're not in contact in that center. And then we get over here to the 5, 6, and 7. So these individuals who have these dominant archetypes, they're in the mind. So these are the mental activity group. The 5 is the overuser of the mind. So it's the observer, the thinker, the inventor. Think of like Albert Einstein, Bill Gates, just highly intelligent, but they can also be seen as a head on a stick. So they're the ones that are probably most disconnected from their heart and their body. So for them, a way to support them is sharing like, hey, if you connect to your heart and your body, you've got all this other information and intelligence. And then they love it. They're like, oh, it's like more information, because that's their thing. Yeah. And then the 6 has limited focus of their mental activity. So they're kind of always like trying to figure things out. They're called the loyalists, but they're also known as the skeptic. So this is the group of people, really funny people, witty. A lot of comedians are in this group, because they're always thinking of the worst case scenario, but then they have like all the plans for it too.
Yeah.
And so their work, and I mentioned this earlier because 3 and 6 have lines to each other, is about inner wisdom. So the 6s tend to look outside themselves for answers. And when they develop trusting themselves and really using their intuition, they're incredibly powerful. And then the 7s have the limited focus in the mind, and they're also known as the enthusiasts. And so the 7s tend to show up as individuals that like move really fast, they think really fast, but they're not entirely connected to their mind. They can like think their feelings. So these individuals can sometimes show up like they're in their body or their heart, but they're just really like good at kind of faking it. So they can also be mistaken with the 3s just because both types have this habit of like putting masks on to please others or to have this image. So it's about the motivation. 7s is because they're not comfortable being trapped. Like they have this fear. So they're in the fear group. And 3s is about image. So that's the distinction of those.
Awesome. So if you're watching this, where do you feel like you fall on this list in the Enneagram? And as you were talking about it, every single type, the thing that kept coming back to me was I think we get all these things that show up because we forget to ask what we actually want. We show up being guided in the world, and we just forget to say, what is it that I actually want to have happen?
Yeah, it's so true.
So if somebody wanted to connect with you, wanted to dive deeper into this work, how can they connect to you?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, which is bernadettecoaching.com, and you can schedule a 30-minute consultation. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. My email's on there as well. You can reach out to me on Facebook if you have any questions. This work's really important to me. So, and it just keeps going back to no label defines us. And especially when it comes to personality typing in assessments, I don't want people to take these assessments and tests and then just have another label that's going to box them in. So if anyone takes this and they want some tips and tricks and tools, just reach out. I love to share this information. You can also follow me on Instagram at Bernadette Coaching. Mm-hmm. And I put some different Enneagram information up there from time to time as well.
Awesome. Make sure and reach out, and we'll make sure and drop all that stuff in the notes below so anybody can reach out. So since you kind of touched on it, I want to ask you this. Usually it's the last question, but I want to ask you this, and that's what does no label defines me mean to you?
Oh gosh, I love this question. I get, this is where it hits me right here, Nathan. We're all diamonds. We are a network of light beings. And the more we can peel back those labels, the more we can just interact naturally. My vision is creating more love and peace in the world. And it starts with this self-awareness of what labels actually are and how they box us in. They put walls up between ourselves and other people. Mm-hmm. So no label defines me is just incredibly powerful phrase to remind us of those walls. And by connecting to ourselves like you shared and really asking ourselves what's true for us, then we can start to break down those walls for others too.
And so the last question I want to ask you here today is a little bit different than I've asked before. But if you were sitting here and instead of seeing me on the other side of this, you saw your younger self, what would you tell her about labels and becoming her true self?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a little hairy. I'm sure you didn't.
No, I think I think it's so important because we still get to do that. Our younger selves are still living inside us and
Mhm.
holding us back and creating these personalities. So, as I am imagining my younger self, I would just say, just keep being you. You're perfect. You're God's gift already. You were born to be exactly who you be, and there's nothing you need to do. There's no changing, there's no fixing, there's nothing wrong with you. Just keep enjoying being you and be the light and play and just have fun.
Have fun.
Yeah, get back to having fun.
Yeah. So if you're watching this, I ask you the same question. If you were sitting here and you were looking at your younger self, what would you say to that person? Because I truly agree. I think that I don't think we grow up. We just get older, and it all does go back to everything we've ever experienced. So we are our younger self. We are just different because we are ourself. Um, and I think the only other thing I would say is when I think about the label, there's really only one that I think that matters, and it applies to every single one of us, and that's human being, right? Um, so I want to acknowledge you for coming on and sharing all this great information. I know that it will bring value to a lot of people because people are always wanting to identify with labels because guess what? They do make it easier to uh, figure out why we do things we do. And so thank you for sharing. And if you watch this and you gain any value and you know somebody who needs to see it, make sure and share it. And then we will see you next time on Friday, same time, 7 p.m., No Label Live. All right, guys, remember, if you're up to anything big, you have to be patient, you must be diligent, and you must never, never quit.
Love you.
Love you too.